welcome to Plus One to Gaming. I'm Chris.
And I'm Eric.
I'm Billy.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're going to be talking about Adventure 3 in Candlekeep Mysteries, Book of the Raven. So we're going to do an in-depth review of this adventure, talk about what went well, what could be improved, and some tips for integrating it into your campaign. So Bill, you DM'd this campaign for us. Do you want to kick us off with just your visceral reactions, the things that you liked, things that you didn't, or maybe some challenges that you had?
So when I first read this mini campaign and I read it through, there was a lot of interesting things in it, but I noticed that there was a general lack of a story, of an overarching story or an overarching goals for the characters. And first thing I did is I Googled it and I looked on to the D&D community online, which is really active and a great resource. And the general consensus was this doesn't really have a story. There are NPCs and locations and items, but it was up to the DM to incorporate that into an already existing story or figure out how they all tie together. So, as we've talked about before, the story is the number one thing that I care about. We are a storytelling community. We tell stories collectively, and so just having a bunch of interesting things isn't enough. It's nice to have, but that's way less important than having an interesting story, is having interesting locations and interesting NPCs. I was writing the story as I went, actually. I would change things while listening to old podcasts, and when we were done, I would listen to the podcast, and I would try to hear where are we going and what would be cool, and then make small changes and small edits to the general direction, which is what you should be doing anyway, like what I do in my homebrews. But normally in one shots where somebody else has written it, you don't have that ability. So I was trying to use it as think of it as more of a benefit than an issue, and so I took what everybody else was trying, what their goals were, and I tried to incorporate that into the story.
I thought you did a really good job at that, though.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part about playing this adventure was you making us role characters for each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that was fun, but also you being able to bring those characters' stories into this adventure in lieu of a story was just a lot of fun. It made it very easy to kind of jump in that way, I guess.
Yeah, it was nice that everybody's character arc somehow could be tied to what's going on or tied to each other. So with the Moonfire Staff, it was really easy. They're when you think of the system of planes, you have the Feywild and then you have the Shadowfell, which are the opposite. So I was like, oh, okay, the moon, the sun. I could make it how something that you'd think would be in the Feywild would actually be in the Shadowfell, because moon and it's opposite. It's like a reflection. I was like, okay, I could do that. And then with your Chris, your character is an inability to know where they're getting their magic from. I was like, okay, well, we have this Vistani, which is introduced, but never talked about again. The book talks about the Vistani, and if you read through the thing, never mentioned again. They're just oh, these are really cool people, and the Vistani have nothing to do with the rest except for the very beginning.
Probably got an insight check or something.
Yeah.
Nope. So Billy or Chris, one of you two, asked us all to read the campaign before we came to this session. So reading through it, as classic, I didn't do my homework until right before the test. I read it right before this, so it's relatively fresh. It felt like two stories crammed together because, you were saying, Bill, they talk in the first half about the Vistani. They go through some of their cultural things that I didn't know before. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And then we switch to were ravens, who are Vistani adjacent. Yeah, there was just so much stuff that it felt like the story took a left turn and then a right turn.
I knew I should have turned right at Albuquerque.
Yeah, there was just no I don't know. I felt and in game I could feel this because I kept asking, I don't even know why we're here. I didn't have a goal. I didn't know what our goal was. It had something to do with like, why are we? I just couldn't figure it out. So there was, like you said, Billy, there was like no story. There was no goal for the party. There was no. So this was, I thought, very interesting, and I thought Billy did a great job at this. There was actually no central force to drive conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Bill added the spy guy with the amazing voice that we fought.
Oh, Grelton.
And like the evil group that was coming to like steal the artifact. Those weren't in the book.
Yeah.
And like,
which makes total sense. I was reading through it and I was like, but where's that encounter where they come to get the token?
Yeah.
Like that only makes, because
like,
I thought we had missed, like, even the way that you did it was thematic, because like we left and then we came back and there were like NPCs that had, you know, succumbed to their injuries and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I was for sure that I had made a mistake by pushing from my character's perspective to just like get there and try to get her goal completed, because it's the only goal we had.
Yeah.
Really. Again, a fabrication of our, you know, game master and not the story itself. I actually thought it was interesting because I'm really glad I didn't get this one. I'm glad it was you.
Yeah.
For sure. I was worried. That's why I was like asking, and I was like, Mark, have you read yours? Like, are you sure that that yours have, like, the first two have overarching arcs, and yes, like Eric and Chris did an excellent job DMing them, and they added their own twist and like even, you know, changing the settings. But like,
yeah, and I read through mine, and there's like
there's
it's not all laid out for you. There's plenty of stuff to like make your own plot and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But this Book of the Raven is what I was always afraid I would be getting when I bought a Dungeons and Dragons book.
Yes, this is very,
because I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't. Yeah, I was afraid. I know Chris and Eric, if they were given this, they could have figured something out. You know, they have the experience. And they know the background, and they've DM'd before, so it would have been frustrating to them, like it was very frustrating to me. But we would have ended up with, I'm sure, a totally different story, or different things. But it would have worked, and it would have been fun. But if you were handed this, like, without trying to like give away the secrets, like, I don't know what to do. Like, oh, just do what the book says. Hey,
yeah,
it doesn't say anything.
It doesn't say anything.
It is
like,
because I like these things. These short, like, I don't know, like an experienced DM doesn't need these. I don't feel like. So then, like, who is the audience for these things? It is somebody who wants like some structure. They want just an easy, I'll read from the book, we'll do what the book says. There's some room for play. Like, that's what these are designed for. And this one really, like Billy said, it was some NPCs, some lore, and some items, and that's it.
I think one of the most valuable things that we could provide to anybody listening or anybody interested in this adventure, well, actually, I would want to broaden it out a little bit. Instead, I want to give people the tools of how to fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
When those stories don't present a lot of information, what tools can we equip people with to be, you know, when they're in these situations, what to be thinking about? I have some ideas of some notes that I've taken after rereading this and our conversations about it, you know, pre and post game, but I want to kind of give the option up to everyone else to brainstorm a little bit.
So I'll go first, I guess. My main, I've already talked about it a little bit, but the things that I want to see in really any game we play, I tend to think of them as like scenes in a movie. And like there's a ton of like easy guides out there for like how to write a screenplay, what a screenplay should be like. Here's where your tension should hit. Here's the resolve. Here's where you get your third act like bring back. You know, there's all these things that like this is what makes a story feel compelling and satisfying at the end. And this didn't have any of those. So the first thing, I mean, you need a goal. Your party needs a goal. This didn't have it. I don't know, like. So also Billy added the library scene and its characters in there. Like that wasn't in here. He added the spy. So he like We could have found him in the library. Like, there was all these things that were like really well done that weren't in the book that did make this more compelling. He also changed Which Way from like ghost town into a lively town so that we can talk to people and get information. So he made that a scene, whereas before it would have just been us walking through a creepy old town and not much happened. Maybe an encounter. So I think first of all, your story needs a goal. So if you come into something like this and you don't know what your characters are supposed to be doing, they're not going to know either. So you need to manufacture something for them to do, a concrete thing for them to do. I felt like even ours was kind of ethereal. I didn't even know what we were supposed to do with the Moonfire Staff, but it was at least something. And like in the games past, like the one I ran, you had to get those books back. Like it's a concrete thing. Go here, find these books because you're in trouble. This didn't have a goal. And the other thing, it needs a central force to drive conflict. There needs to be an antagonist, something that is working maybe straight against you or alongside you to try to complete the goal before you do. This also doesn't have that. There's just nothing going on. So that's the way that like I tend to come at these things. I want to look at them as stories. And in doing that, I can envision my scenes. You know, this is Act 1. We're setting the conflict up. This is Act 2. This is where they're taking the ring to Mordor. There's going to be a couple things that try to stop them along the way. And then this is Act 3. This is Mount Doom. This is the battle. This, you know, like you want a satisfying conclusion. And I feel like we all felt like at the end of this one, Billy even just had to tell us like, and we're done. You didn't get to do it because there was no goal. So there was no conclusion.
Yeah. We would have just gone on and on and on with the adventure.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, and like these are supposed to be able to be dropped into like any campaign you're currently running. That is the point of them. But the other ones we did, I kind of see them again. Like, so if you're thinking of like a sitcom or like an episodic storytelling, like anime or whatever, you've got your overarching story, and then sometimes they have the episodes where they like play baseball or whatever, like the little cutout episodes are.
Filler.
The little filler oneers. They still have their own plot in those little, 22-minute episodes. And there are a couple things maybe that you can pull from those episodes that'll come back later. That's what I want these to be. I felt like the other two kind of were, and this one just is not. Like, it's set up the Vistani, which are really cool. You maybe get a trinket, which is kind of cool, but it wasn't a self-contained story.
Yeah, I think this seems to me like it would be better, like you just said, if you had it's running or characters you played with, and you wanted to drop something in without having to build it entirely, because that is a lot of work if you're doing your own campaign.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of intriguing stuff in like. Yeah, I was ready to keep playing, probably because my character was the main like driving plot, so I was like invested there. Yeah, and then like if I had done the checks and everything, find out about like the Were Ravens and the Scarlet Sash, is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Like all that stuff sounded so cool when I was reading it. And I was like, I mean, if my character found out about that, I would, as a player, be interested in being like, oh, like Secret Society, I want to play that. Yeah. And then the book's like, by the way, you could drag this out for months. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. Classic author, whoever wrote that. Yeah. That was like the end of every section. It was like, and don't forget, you can make up whatever you want. We know.
Yeah. Like you could,
but that would be cool. Like, I think it started a thing that could go. It was like the first season and the big to be continued at the end if you wanted to. But the way we're doing it, it's like seems like an outlier that doesn't quite fit.
Well, I mean, the stated purpose of this book is to do specifically that, is to have self-contained stories that you can drop into your longer campaigns as like a break a little bit. Yeah. Let's stop this big bad evil guy chase and have like a fun little romp and then get back to it. Where it's like you said, I feel like this is the first half of that.
Yeah, or if you have a pre-existing story, you can still massage this into that story very easily.
I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. The Were Ravens are cool. The Vistani's cool. The Orcus statue thing is cool. Like,
see, I could kind of take or leave it. I thought that was kind of a MacGuffin that.
I mean, it is, but it's a MacGuffin that it actually isn't a MacGuffin, because a MacGuffin is something that drives the plot, and this. I didn't know we were looking for this thing.
Exactly.
We just found it on accident.
There's, for me, if I were running this, I would probably either make a decision to have some story around it or just remove it completely, because it was just such a weird item that didn't really pertain to what we were doing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's kind of tough, and that's something that I struggle with D&D, especially like when you just get like random loot tables.
Yeah.
Like, I want... Like, I get it. Like, that's just how it is. But
this wasn't a random. This was a story element for this item.
This was a story element that didn't actually matter to the story.
It's an element because there was no story. So like, so that was the first thing. So I'll kind of do a quick 5-minute spiel about how I tried to link everything. Is that like, I decided early on that the overarching goal was to get to know where to find the Vistani. So it talks about the Vistani. They're not even talked about anything else, but they have this connection with the Shadowfell, and the Shadowfell is what Stardew needed, and the Vistani was what Leander needed. And so I was like, okay, we could make both of those go to find out more about the Vistani, you find out more about the Shadowfell. So the ending goal in me was to find out a location where you could go. Like, once you know where the Vistani are, that's when the next story starts.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, looking at it, like, they also have that weird undead, like a lot of combat of jumping boots. I mean, I added the jumping because that was interesting, but
he had a ring of jumping, I think.
Yeah, he had a ring of jumping, but it's still like he had like unearthly jumping, but it also, like, it's just like, as soon as you go there, you're supposed to have fight. He's supposed to be a brainless enemy. And that's not fun. Brainless enemies are dumb. So then I made him being like, okay, well, this is, and then it also says that they can't leave. And so, like, I kind of very quickly realized that, like, the Orcus figure says that they can't be turned. And so I was like, well, if they are, like, being contained, it's probably like the same magic as a turning magic. So he's probably trying to get this so that he could leave his, like, some priest. And I was going to, like, show, like, in the story, if you went that direction instead of went back to help the Ravens, that, like, it was a Vistani priest that had, like, cast this spell that contains them. And that's why he hates the Vistani, but he has that pin because he fought with the Vistani. But he wants that so that he could leave, so that he has his own character, arc of wanting to get this item. The Ravens just want to keep it out because they didn't really talk about why the Ravens were there. So I was like, okay, well, they are the book of the Vistani said that they worship ravens. I'm like, okay, well, then maybe the Were Ravens work for the Vistani. I don't know. Like, I was like, okay, that'll work. So then I had it all linked to this Vistani. So the Vistani turned into the connection to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had the driving force had their own goal, which had nothing to do with the Vistani. They just wanted that orc because they were going to make a deal with him, in that, like, they had some goal which doesn't matter. I could have told you what it was, but it didn't really matter. But the White had agreed to help them if he gives them this item, so that he could leave, and then the Dwight and them would fight off and do whatever they wanted. But so that was their goal, was like, and I tried to hint it that he went over there to do the trade, and then when you talk to him, he's like, oh, the guy he gave before me, he went through to trade, but the item was stolen, and then he was killed because he was like, he went to trade, like, I'll give you, oh, I don't have it anymore, murdered, like, but I didn't want to, like in my head, that's how it was. They were linked because they're very small connections.
Yeah, and none of those connections are in this adventure.
Yeah.
So,
when even like our relationship to the item is almost non-existent. Like, we just learned that they have this evil thing. It's like, oh, you have that? That's, like, bad.
Yeah, we actively didn't want it.
Yeah.
So, like, it's interesting. Yeah, they're just, like, the story around it. Like, there was very little way that I could get my character to be interested in that item.
Yeah.
And it almost had to be like, in order to progress the story, like, okay, well, I guess we'll like try and dispose of it for you or something. Like, will that move the story forward?
Yeah.
I was just gonna trade it to the evil guy, honestly. So I was like, I don't know what else to do. Like, you give me a key and show me a locked door, I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
But if we would have ignored it completely and let the bad guys in this campaign have it, like, it wouldn't have affected really anything that we were trying to do. We just did it as like good Samaritans in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I thought that you would mention the Vistani. So like the goal was that like you mention the Vistani and they don't trust you enough to tell you about the Vistani because you're newcomers.
I don't trust
and
you
so
enough to
like
talk about that.
Yeah, and so like but they like hint that they know more about the Vistani, but they won't really tell you about it. But then these guys come and their goal is to capture this, and so you help them defend off these guys, and you don't even need to go through the Shadowfell, like that whole Harn Mausoleum. Like if you didn't go there, and if you just stayed the night with them, the guys would have shown up, and then you would have had to fight off them or protect them, or made a deal with them, or however you would have done with it. And then the Were Ravens either would have been dead, and you would have the item, and then you would go through with Harn, trade it in. He gives you the information of where they are, or you fight them off, and then they're like, okay, well, in thanks, like I know you were interested in the Vistani, but then when you never mentioned the Vistani, like it kind of threw it off. I'm like, okay, like what do I do there? Do I just throw it randomly at you? Like, and that's like a part that seems stupid. That like I didn't want to like when I like in the last episode. I'm like, you never actually mentioned the Vistani to him. Like that seems like, well, that's dumb. Like obviously we're there, but like
they don't know that.
They don't know it. Like, and I was like, you need to know. And so like it was that threw my whole plan completely off because like you just went through, did this, and then went on without ever mentioning the Vistani. You mentioned the Shadowfell a lot, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, I know how to get to the Shadowfell. And like they're hinting like, oh well, this is a quest to protect this, all this other stuff. I'm like, oh, from who? I'm like, oh, I can't tell you or anything like that. Or if you mention the Vistani. But like that didn't ever happen, so I had to like on the fly, which is why I kind of had like a weird ending because that the ending would have been one of those two. Like either you defended off any of the items, or you work for Arn or kill Harn, and he has. Like, if you wanted to fight him, he would have had the item, and then the item would have been a compass basically that points to the nearest, and that's how they know is that the item actually like has like some sort of power that leads to the next Vistani settlement or like safe zone, which is how they travel through the Vistani, because it never says how they travel through. They're like, oh, they're known for traveling through. So I'm like, oh, how the fuck do they do that? I have to make this up. And so that was like my idea was that like it's not super powered. It's just if I was to travel, like how you don't want to get lost because Shadowfell's lost, and you want to be able to travel freely between the two if there's danger, which is and that's kind of I threw off that okay, they have these crossings that are guarded, and then they also have these items that help them to get to the next crossing. But like neither of those actually panned out in the story just because of how it went, and I'm like, and fine.
Well, it's not for your players to mess things up. That's the one
it's
thing.
It's not even that though. It's not even like we messed it up. I didn't know we were looking for the Vistani. Yeah. Because it wasn't like, again, we didn't have goals. Like we had goals that were in our backstories that usually aren't like the goal of the campaign. Like every player has their own like thing they're trying to do. But when the campaign doesn't have a goal, then Mark's background becomes the goal. And it was just so loose that like, again, I was confused a lot of the time of like what we were trying to do. So I don't think that's our fault, and I don't think that's Billy's fault. I think we made the best of the situation. But Billy brought something up that I think is really important. The villains there's really only one villain, and it's that white that you don't have to meet. Everything else and the white is, you said, is a mindless person. I'm on the page. I don't really see like role playing as this thing. Villains also need goals. It's brilliant of you, Bill, to like write in. All right, what would this thing want? That can connect to the characters. What do the were-ravens want? What do the other evil people that you invented want? Like, what are their goals that drive them rather than just like, I'm evil. I'm here to do evil. So that's really important. If you run into something like this and it feels flat, like you're just killing, because there was a lot of chances in here for random encounters that we didn't do because those don't drive story. If that's the only thing your campaign offers, find something in here to make it part of the story. And actually, when we did the, I don't remember the name of the campaign that I ran.
Mazfrost's Mighty Digressions.
Yeah, Mazfrost's. There was one random encounter with the thief dude. In the book, he is not connected at all. He's just a brigand or whatever. So I connected him to the bounty hunter person that you met to make it a tighter story. So even just stuff like that, like he had a motivation, was just he was a high grade bandit, but it tied it into the story to make it more of like that's a third act callback, kind of like, oh, she was talking about this.
And it was
This is
rewarding.
this guy.
Yeah, it was rewarding as a player too to be able to tie that loop.
Yes, for sure. That was a good like slight change. But
good,
like
big payoff.
Being able to recognize that, oh, I could make a very small change. Like I don't have to change the character at all, really. But it does have a big payoff, and it feels more rewarding because it's like overcoming that obstacle now has an effect on the overall story, instead of just like, okay, now we can continue with the story. This is the detour that we have overcome. Now some reason it's more rewarding when the obstacle that you have leads you, even if it's very slightly, leads you in the right direction, instead of just like, I got to do this, or it's in my way.
Yeah, exactly.
No reason why. Yeah. So that was good on Eric to recognize that.
Yeah.
But yes, and I think that we have kind of all, like, you're reading through and some things feel like kind of flat. Like if you're reading through an adventure and something feels like, I don't know, like, do they have to do this? Some of, like, I feel like they'll put in these things just to make it something to do. Because like the whole time that we were in this adventure, that we were going through the map, like nothing happened. Like we're like, we go to this thing and you're like, yep, you found that thing. And then we go to the next thing and you're like, yep, you found that thing. Like there is places in here for random encounters that is like the only reason they're there is to make something happen. Like, so I don't know. I think that's kind of, it's a mark of like a I don't know, a bad story, but it wasn't a good story. Either it's very boring because we're not like doing anything other than like walking and like, there's that tower. All right, there's this tree on a hill, or it's grinding because every time we get to a new place, we have a random encounter. Like neither of those things are interesting.
Yeah.
It was boring for you guys because you didn't like, something that I could have improved is in my head, like you've passed all of the checks to continue on. That party was behind you one day. So if you had to spend the night or you got lost and you had to be standing, they would have caught up to you. And so they were there. Like if you look onto the map, they're like, if some of the older maps, I would say they're on some of the older maps. Like if I switch the map to the road, like if you look on there, I don't know if you can see him there. Maybe I moved him. Yeah, okay. So I'll just let me switch something real quick. Can you see the roadmap now?
Yep.
All right.
Oh, was one of those skeletons that he had? Was that Gralton? Because we planted him under that tree. Did they raise him and use him as a minion?
That would have been cool. I should have done that, but no, that was the scout that was following you behind you. So like the guy with the leather armor, he was the scout that was tracking you down, and the other guys were following you right behind. So he was only like a few hours behind you, and then the party was like a little bit behind. So he would have found you, and then like it would have been something else to be like, oh, do you hear something? Like, oh, do you see him? And then you try to kill the scout before he reports back. Like, so there was, in my head, like a reason, like, oh, you need to get this through here or something bad will happen.
Yeah.
And like you see he's there on his little horse. But yeah, but you didn't know that. So to you it was slogging along.
Yeah.
I probably could have had a better
Yeah, so if we had
that was
known,
happening, yeah,
if we had known somehow that these people were like behind us and tracking us or whatever, like that could have added some tension, and pushed us.
yeah.
But again, like we don't like because it wasn't in the story. Like I don't know these dudes. I don't.
Yeah.
Why are they coming after us? I don't even know what we're going here for.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe we can talk about that a little bit, like some ways that people could actually hook better into this story now that we've gone through it and played it. Like it's so much easier with hindsight because they're actually, it is a very fragmented story. There's, I think it does take a little bit of experience to figure out in what ways do you need to make changes to fit your campaign. That's a tough call, and it's going to be different for everybody. But some of the things in the reading through the adventure that really stuck out to me was there's the daughter Hiluth. One of the ways that the party can find the book is like a raven could deliver it, or they could happen upon it, and this raven's like pecking the shit out of it.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting. And then you kind of read the story about this person who was taken in by the Vistani, and then has the journal seemed like taken away or something. And then there's a map inside. That map turns out is placed there by one of the Scarlet Sash people. So there's like kind of this neat, like, okay, well, there's this little culture that's happening, the seed of a story. Some of the other hooks, like the mom, I don't know if we ever learned her fate, the mother Brantifax, but it's very easy. Like that whole house is tormented. There's even more hauntings than we discovered in there. The mom could ask the party, hey, I want you to put my family to rest. Yeah. That's an easy hook. Take or leave the whole Orcus figure thing. And you can, I think it would be fun for a party to explore this haunted mansion, figuring out what's hauntings, what's, Scarlet Sash members, if you include them. But, even just putting that family to rest because you got a reward for that, some kind of badge of heroism or something.
Yeah. And so I want to take a step back. The book, this I think is like a perfect example of how fragmented this story is. The book is written by somebody who got hurt and was like taken in by the Vistani and like nursed back to health. And it's like her journal of the time she was with the Vistani. And at like the end, it's like she approaches a misty, like tall castle, and it stops as if the book is ripped out of her hand. So it's like, cool, we're going to find this lady. What's going on with this lady? Mm-hmm. Nothing. We don't know. We don't care.
Yeah. It is a good segue into a Ravenloft campaign, though. That's like...
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is obviously Strahd's castle. Cool. So it's only a reference, though. Mm-hmm. That, like, we know, that's cool. So she's not in the story. It was brought by a raven who is a ghost of the daughter.
Yes.
She's, like, we encounter her grave, but like, her goal was, I guess, to get the Scarlet Sash out of the house.
Yeah.
That's not clear at all. And then the map was put in there by a different person. So, like, in this one book, there's 3 stories that, like, 2 of them, like, we're going to rescue a lady, or we're going to clear a house, or we're going to find treasure. Like, I just don't. So in this one, like, I think it's like a perfect example of the shortcomings of this story. In this one book, there are 3 hooks, and none of them are really like I don't know, none of them really have like a clear goal for me.
Yeah. So in that case, my suggestion to somebody wanting to DM this campaign, especially a new DM, pick one.
Yeah.
Pick one and stick with it, and just cut out the fluff, cut out the rest. I feel like the more you focus in on this story, or focus in on one story for this, your party's going to have a more enjoyable time, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, because they talk about how like the map was put in there by one of the Raven folk, because she likes to hide things. Like what? I don't know. It's just so strange. Like if the daughter Raven, Ghost Raven, put it in there as like here's how to get to my house, like that would make sense. Mm-hmm. But then the journal should be like her mom's journal or something. Like
right.
It's just 3 different stories in one.
Because like if that Raven is the ghost of the girl who delivers the book and starts pecking the shit out of it, there's nothing in that book that would lead you to Chalet Brantifax. It's only after the book's delivered to Candlekeep that somebody puts the because they it had some tenuous story of the Shadowfell. They put this map to Chalet Brantifax, which happens to be where that Raven girl was from.
Yeah,
like that's a big fucking coincidence, and almost like I can suspend a lot of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
But
I need the internal logic of the story to make sense.
Right.
I don't need it to make sense in like our world, our physics, our stuff, but I need it to make sense internally. Yeah, this one. Yeah.
So and again, I can't reiterate enough. Like, not at all a critique of Bill or his DMing. It's just the lack of material to work.
I'm actually like double impressed now because like I had fun. It's a fun game.
Blessed. Yeah.
But just this like reading through it, like what Bill was able to add to make it compelling and make it fun.
I wonder if
I am impressed.
I am half tempted for like the accompanying blog post for this episode to like kind of write like a map for people based off of our conversations of everything we've talked about, of just what they can do, almost like modules, like supplemental modules, so people can run this better.
Yeah,
because I think there's a lot of fun seeds of adventure here. Sure. The book just really doesn't do a phenomenal job of bringing them together.
Yeah, like you can find your, like, the key was to find your own motivation in all this information that they have. So it's kind of, the onus is on the GM. So like, one that we didn't even talk about is that the Scarlet Sash, like, you can join the Scarlet Sash and they'll make you become a raven, a were-raven.
Yeah.
And if that's something that a character wants, that's a really cool reward.
You could have flown.
Like, I want to become, my goal is to become,
I know, finally.
Yeah.
Before level 8.
Become more powerful. Like, yeah, you don't lose anything from becoming a were-raven. It doesn't seem like you still have all your powers, but now you can turn into a fucking raven. So like, if that was your goal to gain power or gain anything, you'd be like, well, I can help you become this. Like, it's
how does that
good.
work for a satyr? The half bird,
I don't
half
know.
goat.
That would be awesome.
Half man, half bird, half goat.
I feel like, Chris, if there were just like, to your point, I feel like there's a lot here, but it still puts the onus of decision making and the creativity mostly on whoever's running it. Mm-hmm. But like, even to make it easier, if there had just been some, like, I don't know, like D6 charts, like if I were doing it and it's like, there's 3 stories. If, it's like, I'd like to have that even for myself, just to be like, if this happens, then I don't have to necessarily think of it on the spot, but I can randomize some sort of connection here, or,
and it's testament,
something like that,
I think, to what we preach here generally is just like flexible DMing and flexible storytelling. If you pre-plan all of this stuff out, it's like you can guarantee the party's always going to zag when you want them to zig. Having the, like Billy demonstrated, like all of this stuff was seamless to us, whether it was written or not, because Billy recognized where the gaps were, those connective tissues, and lack of conflict drivers, and be able to paint those into the game so that things are progressing.
I think that if you're listening to this and you want to run this campaign for some reason, you chose this one specifically to run with your friends. Like, there are some very simple hooks that you could make. So when I was thinking at the beginning, it wasn't as interesting, but it's really simple, is remove the Orcus statue completely, because that thing is a MacGuffin. Well, not even a MacGuffin, it's a red herring, really. Because it has no... have Dorvath, the white at the end, if you beat him and you do all this other stuff, you get a saddle. Who gives a fuck? I didn't even put the saddle in there. I would have removed the saddle because
I had to look it up.
It's also a trap.
Penelope would have loved it.
Yeah. If you would have had that saddle, but then you would have fought like war horses, which doesn't make any sense because the war horses can't physically fit. You fight 3 war horses. They are large creatures that are bigger than can fit in the middle of that the
mausoleum.
You're fighting
the mausoleum. The mausoleum. The horses are 10 by 10 creatures, like per the book, because that's how big they are. So they would have
Chris
had to been
Perkins
like
did not copy
squeezing.
edit this.
The party
Yeah, but if you
instantly
look-
dies as you're smushed against the walls.
Yeah,
They
like
manifest
horse
into.
It's a trap. It's a
Yeah,
horse
it-
trap.
It's absolutely a horse trap. Like, and if you look on there, it is 15 by 20 feet, and you're supposed to fit two 10 by 10 foot. Like, it just you could have two next to each other, and then the third squeezing. Like, it just doesn't work. How do you have also the party in there? So, like, if you had a 4-person party, like just based on rules, you have 15 by 20. So you have like 12 5-foot by 5-foot squares. 4 of them are taken up by the party.
Yeah.
And somehow 12 of them are taken up by these horses. So you need at least 16 just to fit so I immediately threw that out. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing. It just can't physically work.
Yeah.
I wonder if anybody else has caught that.
I mean, like, you can have it like there's other ways you could have people like squeezing and other things.
I mean,
but then
yeah.
if you have the trap, why would you do that? Like, then these horses aren't tough to begin with, but it's just more annoying that you're stuck where you are and nobody can move at all. Like, you're just like, oh my god, what am I like? Stupid.
Just punching a horse at
Yeah.
I'm looking at the underlying subtext of like somebody wrote this and thought, okay, I'll put this jumping zombie in a mausoleum with some horses and a saddle. Like why is there? You could have thought of so many other cool and interesting settings for that.
Yeah.
I just feel like why did you take that approach?
Well,
Nobody uses fucking saddles in D. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people use saddles in D&D.
Not a big reward.
Yeah.
And this is the only combat that is actually written out, and it's not a good one because like you start off with the 2 gargoyles, and if you move within 10 feet from the starting positions, even while you're fighting the gargoyles, so if you dare to maneuver around the gargoyles, then you kick off the 3 waves of 3 zombies each.
Yeah, that sounded real bad.
Super easy to. Yeah, but like at that point, like it's just really like the gargoyles are hard enough at all for a 4-man party. Like they are based on difficulty, they're very hard. And then you throw in zombies on top of that, and then like I know the zombies per paper, like they have a chance to come back. Like if you kill them, you roll a d6. All this other stuff that's boring because at this point you're just fighting the zombies. And like if they pop back up, you just kill them again. Like that's and having multiple waves. Like I threatened that he had multiple waves, but having you fight all 3 multiple waves, it would have taken 2 whole sessions to run a very boring encounter.
Yeah.
So I basically scrapped half of that encounter, and I nerfed the gargoyles and had them fight separately just because like you guys almost died in that anyway, and I nerfed that, and so like it just. Having it, this is what they only have 1 combat encounter here, so let's make it almost impossible. And then if Dorvith jumped in and started fighting at the same time as the gargoyles, you would have there was no way for you to have won. Like no level 3 party could fight 2 gargoyles and a white at the same time.
Yeah, 3 level 3s.
Yeah, it's just
not happening.
Absolutely not. Or even if you had 4 level 3s or 5 level 3s, you still would have died. And so.
I mean, a white is challenge level 3, so the
plus 2 gargoyles.
Yes. And the gargoyles are both challenge level 2.
Yep.
So yeah, that is. I mean, that's more than a deadly encounter.
Yeah, if you go to like the GM book where you talk about like your experience and you multiply it by how many people, I think 3 is double. You double the level experience if you have like so you take each of them individually and then you double it if there are 3 of them. Because I think 2 is 1.5 times.
Wait, you got me confused. Slow down and explain that again, please.
So if you look in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there is a table that like how to make encounters, and you take the experience of like the challenge rating goes hand in hand with the experience. So you take the experience of all the creatures and you add it all up. And then based on how many creatures there are, you multiply that. So there's a multiplier. And I think 3 or 4 is you multiply by 2 because obviously fighting them sequentially is going to be easier than fighting them all at the same time. And so like a challenge rating 3 monster is supposed to be a good challenge for a full party of 4 of level 3 people. So he would have been hard. The 2 gargoyles alone as challenge rating 2. I think I did the math. I don't have my DM handbook right now, but if you let's see if I can. Yeah, I'm going to try to do. I get a legit table. If
I think I found a table like that, and it's confusing as fuck to me.
Yeah, and this is one of my questions actually. So I'm glad you're going into this.
Because I think it actually would be a good idea to do an episode on building encounters. Because I think that's a fun topic in and of itself. But I think for this conversation, like this encounter was way, way skewed.
Yeah.
For a level 3 group. I mean, even 4 or 5, I don't know how much that would.
And I don't know why I'm fighting this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason. So that's what I was saying is, if you wanted to have like a really quick, simple hook, you could just ignore the statue of Orcus or that item, and you have the ravens are asking you to get something back from Harn.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Easy.
Like you get to the ravens, they are already friendly. So, but you have to go you want something from make it that you want something from the ravens. The ravens have something, so replace the item that they have with something that whatever your characters want. But in return, they're like, oh, this guy in this crossing stole somebody has something, somehow it got over there, and we can't get it back. We are not able or willing to go over there because we're not combat people. If you go over there, steal it, take it back from Dorvith Harn, we'll make a trade and give you the item you want. That's a really simple one that you can you still do all the thing, you still do the interesting exploration of the part, and then when you find them, they're like, hey, oh yeah, we have that item that you're looking for, because they're collectors or whatever, but we won't give it to you without a trade. And that's very, very easy. It's kind of one-dimensional and I want to say boring, but at least everybody knows what they're trying to do.
Exactly.
Just say, so at the beginning, have an introduction that we need to find this one item, and any of the 3 ways that you find that book, none of them really work for this, but you could just rewrite it.
Yeah.
That okay, somehow we know that we have this old map, and we know that this item is here, whatever this MacGuffin, this MacGuffin.
That would be a MacGuffin, yes.
Yeah, so you're trying to get this MacGuffin back from this house. We know that it's the house. We don't know where it is. So you're searching it through the house. You never find it. But at the end, you find the were-ravens who have the item, but they're willing to trade it if you go to Hearth and do it. Easy. You're going in here. Now you have you're at the third act is to go to the,
I mean, or even we had this item, but this dude stole it. So you have to now get it from him.
Yeah, you can make any change on
it.
And
I mean, you said something about him having the pen of the Vistani. It could be that. We had the pen, and this white stole it when we traveled to that side, and we almost we lost many of our flocks, so we are afraid to go back there. If you want it, you can go get it from him, but we can't help you. Yeah. So yes, everything, because the white. It just felt like another weird turn in this story that I didn't understand why we were there.
With no story, but I want to know more about this guy. Why is he in this mausoleum? Why does he have a ring of jumping? What's his motives?
Yeah.
The other thing
is
he
has a saddle of the Cavalier, and there should be an interesting story behind this guy. What is it?
And I'm okay with a simple MacGuffin story because honestly, I'm less concerned about the general story that we're trying to drive for. I'm more concerned about what we're doing with each other along the way.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit. I just want to encourage, after reading this adventure and even some of the other ones that are in here that we've played, I just, there's this almost tendency to try and make things too complicated or too convoluted or just so creative. Simple works.
Yeah.
If you really create a good environment for people to play in, they're going to make that world magical every time.
Yep.
Let them
if the book we found was a story about the Vistani, and the Vistani are what we need, and we know but we need a thing in order for them to trust us, or in order for us to get to them, and there's a map in there already, not put in by a second party. telling you, here's how to get this thing to find the Vistani. And then we do what Billy just said. We meet the Were-Ravens. They don't have it anymore, but we got to go. Like, that's a simple story, and it doesn't change a single thing of what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes us understand what our goal is.
Yeah.
And another party could be looking for the Vistani for nefarious purposes, and exactly what Billy built in, be like right alongside of us, but maybe a day behind, and that builds tension. Like,
yeah, the book easily could have had a map. They could have mapped out the route that the Vistani were traveling, or and give you a hook to go on a road trip to track them down while you're being chased by something like he threw in. Like that would be
fun.
It seems like an easy hook, and that would have given us more of a direct connection to Vistani rather than like me just basically forgetting to have my character mention it.
Yeah.
And that really needed to happen when we got to the chalet to be efficient anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, in the book, she could have said, we stopped at the chalet, and my pin they gave me for being a trusted person, I left there. I forgot it and I didn't realize I did until we left. So we're like, okay, we don't know. We know where they were. We don't know where they are, but we know where the pin is. That'll, like there's a ton of things that are like relatively simple, but yeah, I think.
Or like do they have a migratory pattern? Do they travel? I know they don't stay in one spot, but either the birds or the Vistani could have been hinted at. Like they can travel anyway. Both of those groups, so it seems like the adventure could have had an easier hook to get you to locations. They could literally be anywhere you want it.
Yeah. So
that's a really good idea. Now you could have had like kept the Were-Ravens in there because they have a tendency to steal. Just say like, oh, I don't know what happened to my pin. I know I had it, and you just see, oh, the Were-Ravens stole it because they didn't know that the Were-Ravens stayed there because the Were-Ravens are in there. It's kind of a mix of, they know that you're there because it tells you how they're trying to like make these sounds. So they know that you're there if they know you're there. But then at the end also, you overhear them having a loud conversation. And I'm like, that you can't, one or the other, buddy. Like you can't have them that they know that you're sneaking around, and then you get to this door and they're shouting at this conversation of what to do with this item. Like I think
I kind of liked the idea that like it's pretty Scooby-Doo-ish that like we're going to this haunted mansion, and like, is it haunted? Isn't it haunted? Yeah. Yes, for both.
Yeah.
And like, so we find the red herring of the red scarlet sash people. And there is actually ghosts too. So like, it's kind of a double twist, but that wasn't a central part of the story.
No, that setting was really cool, and like
the setting was cool.
Having that setting.
Sorry, I liked how we found out, like, discovering the history of the denizens there. Like, that was one of the more.
That was really
parts.
interesting.
Yeah.
I know, but I knew that would be interesting for you, so I made sure, like, that journal, like, it's in there, but it just like, it doesn't have journal entries. It's just like, this is what you find out in the journal. So like, I wrote the journal entries because that's way more fun than saying like, you read a journal and find out these facts. Like,
I think my favorite is that the Were-Ravens have an entire D6 chart for what funny noises they make in what room, which apparently has no bearing on pretty much anything. But then the rest of the author's like, you can just make up the other stuff. But this is very important.
Yeah, this is what he spent his time on writing a D6 chart on.
And like, I appreciate it. I just want one of these for every single decision, so I don't have to do it myself.
Because one of these is he mimics a snorting hog, which sounds like it's coming from the kitchen.
You did.
You got that one.
You got that one.
I remember
I legitimately rolled that D6. And then after that one, I'm like, this is stupid. No more of this, because what's the point?
Because then we're looking for like, is there a ghost pig?
After I read that, I was just like, I didn't want to fudge the numbers. I'm like, okay. Because I made it to seem like that was the dumb one who did the hog, which is the old
that's
man.
Not scary.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just like, oh, I'm helping like the other, they didn't
glass breaking.
I'm making sense.
Exactly. So they didn't talk about him, but I made him like as a comic relief. That like
Taskbar was awesome.
He's the one that like he gave up that he was that they were like Were-Ravens. He's the one that did the pig, and they're just like idiot, because they're like doing scary voice, glass breaking. He's like, oh, I can do a real good pig. Like That's not what we're trying to do here. Like,
Taskbar was my favorite Were Raven.
I
Yeah,
was hoping that you would figure
Cletus
out
the
that at
ghost.
the end when I said like Taskbar can do the pig, that you realize that that's exactly what happened. Is I rolled it and I'm like, how do I make this cool? Because now there's a pig here. It's like, oh, because he's old and kind of senile and kind of he's not smart, but it's really funny that he's
Way to put the table,
trying to be
Bill.
secret, and then like he immediately is like, and I was like, okay, like
It's just a little pignorant.
yeah.
Ah!
So yeah, and they give these guys really cool like backstories and all this stuff, but like,
Yeah.
how do you know that unless interacting with them like is not like, hi, I'm this. These are my attributes, and these are the things I like. Like,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is really cool to have to inform your decisions.
Yeah.
And
Honestly, I just want this to be a setup so that I can go and try to join Scarlet Sash if we're being real. That sounds.
Yeah.
I wish there was more about like that than the other stuff.
They could have made this story, and it feels like they put a lot of work into the Scarlet Sash.
Yes.
And
like-
you had to like ask about it or like just get the roles right in order to find all that out. You know, you weren't going to stumble across it.
No.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the author, and I don't want to be overly critical, but it feels like this adventure is just like some cool different ideas the author had and just like threw them into a thing and tried to connect them loosely.
Yeah.
The Scarlet Sash is really cool. This Harn, the mausoleum is kind of, I mean, like it's a standard thing.
Yeah.
But like you could make it cool. Like the book, the Vistani are a cool thing that I've never heard about, so I'm sure he probably wrote about them. Or maybe
they're
even invented
in
them.
the Curse of Strahd.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
they
pretty
are?
prominent.
Yeah.
Ravenloft. Yeah.
Okay, see, I didn't play the.
Yeah.
I'm not involved in Ravenloft at all, so that makes sense. So maybe I should have done. If they would have said like Vistani and then parentheses like see Ravenloft, I would have known because I didn't know that they were a thing before this. So I thought I was making up shit on my own, thinking that they didn't have a backstory
like
because
a
they
whole
didn't
lore.
go. Yeah, they didn't go into any of the lore. Like, so I was making shit up.
So that's interesting because, like, again, the target market for this book is, I would assume, like newer DMs who just want to be able to like plug and play some things.
Yeah.
And if they're going to name drop stuff that like you have to, like, I would consider Billy way more versed on D&D lore than I am, but he never played Curse of Strahd, so he doesn't know what these, like, you need to know who your audience is, who you're writing to. So if you just name drop the Vistani, like put in like see Ravenloft, see Curse of Strahd, see that.
Simple as that. Just parentheses.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they do that a couple times too. There's something else that I don't remember what it was reading through, but it was like, see the Dungeon Master's Guide or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Or even like
And
a
it was like-
small table of just like a brief history of the Vistani would work. Very prominent in Ravenloft campaign for more information.
And I think to be completely fair, I've noticed this because I went back and looked at some of the other adventures now that we've finished them.
Yeah.
So there's no spoilers or anything. But I think there's obviously a difference. This is like a compilation, of authors. So I think one of the problems, honestly, in a practical sense, is like the editing of this book, not necessarily the authors themselves, because that kind of stuff I think should just be standardized, just as like a really dorky publishing rule.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
someone should have gone through and said like, oh, if we're going to do that in adventure number 1, we're going to say, see the Dungeon Master's Guide for this, then we should do that in all references moving forward.
Yeah.
And also, not necessarily editing the content of the adventures because you want those people to have that creative muscle to flex because that's their thing. But just kind of some of those technical format. Yeah, just like literal semantics got in the way.
Well, there were, I know one instance, particularly, there was an author who I think requested their name to be removed from the module they wrote. There was some kind of small controversy. Basically, it was edited beyond the scope of their intention.
Yeah.
So it was edited so much. Maybe it was the Book of the Raven. I think
I was going to say, because I could see that happening here, because this felt like it was built to be a much longer. This was a joke I was going to make. Like, felt like this guy had 3 times the length, and they're like, "Oh, you get 5 pages." They're like, "Oh."
Yeah. But apparently,
I hadn't even.
Yeah, that adventure.
I hadn't paid attention. They're edited by different people too. Like,
yeah. So it's interesting. Like, I think we should keep that in mind and give grace to the authors based on your point, Mark. It might not be their decision. They might not have this might not have necessarily been the full intention of the author.
Yeah, unfortunately, creativity for sale isn't created in a vacuum. They have they have bosses and editors and also an audience. Capitalism does it again.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that for all this, number one, I doubt this will ever happen, but Christopher Perkins, if you are listening to this, I would love to play in a game or a campaign that you have 100% full artistic license on, because a lot of this stuff is really interesting and really cool, and I can only imagine how much of the stuff that you thought was key was probably edited out. Yeah, that's what it seems like, is that they're linking things, but they're like, oh, well, this isn't really relevant, so we'll take it out. But they don't realize that it is relevant. You created
Is Christopher Perkins on Twitter? Because maybe he could run this for us, and we'd finally have a full party.
To see,
Can we get on that, Chris?
So, I didn't realize this was written by Chris Perkins.
Do you know who that is?
Yes, I know who that is.
He wrote this one. I didn't look at the author.
I didn't look at the author. I haven't looked at any of them.
It's Chris Perkins.
It's like Chris Perkins is like the head of D&D lore development.
All right, now I'm mad. Now I'm angry.
I thought this was.
Now I'm incensed.
Yeah, see, I don't have the D&D people.
He's the only one I know. I mean, there's one other guy that I recognize.
He's the most famous DM next to Matt Mercer, hands down.
Yes. And Matt Mercer doesn't work for Dungeons and Dragons. Chris Perkins is
so he's their main DM.
I'm trying to figure out what his actual title is.
So do we need to go back to the beginning and not talk shit about him?
I feel like it. Yes.
No, and I can see there's so much lore in this. It's really lore heavy, and that's what you're supposed to be exploring.
Yeah.
I adore Chris Perkins. I think
I do too. I really like him.
Masterful, but that doesn't change my opinion that this isn't a strong adventure.
Yeah, he's the senior story designer at Wizards of the Coast. He is, and he's also one of the faces. If you watch any
the Stan Lee of D&D.
Yes.
See, that shows you how.
If you watch Acquisitions Incorporated, have you watched any of their stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I just saw that he was in Acquisitions Incorporated.
Chris Perkins is the DM for Acquisitions Incorporated. He's the one that writes all the stuff, and those stories are amazing.
Yeah,
they're hilarious. They're fun. They're self-contained. Yeah, everything. I felt like we were holding back, and now, Chris knows better.
But I don't think that. I mean, but he also has enough power that if they edited his stuff.
Yeah, there's no way he would get something
be in this book need to re-edit this.
Okay, this is what I'm gonna do. It's a long shot, but I'm gonna go for it. I'll send a message to Chris Perkins.
Chris Perkins is the project lead on this book.
Yes.
There's no way this got in here without his stamp of approval.
But I will try and shoot a message and just say, hey, would you field an interview regarding this adventure? The worst he can say is no.
Yeah.
I expect him to.
Or just not reply.
Yes, but it'd be kind of cool to talk about it. And honestly, I respect the guy, but I think it would be cool to have an open conversation. We don't think this is good. What happened?
Either sell me on why it is, or
what was your intention? Yeah. I think less aggressive language on my part.
I mean, you can see this. I left as much in as I possibly could, because a lot of these things, these unconnected items, are very, very interesting, and they're really cool. Besides, I think the combat at the end is poorly designed. I will say that. But everything before that, it seemed that may have even been tacked on as something else, because it doesn't really have any connection with the actual the chalet branch effects, which I think is really cool. The map, I think, the guys. That you don't know what's going on. I think that it is kind of haunted, but not really haunted.
Yeah,
and I think that was that's such a cool concept, and I was really excited when I read it. And so that's kind of I wanted to get you to the chalet. So that's at the beginning.
Yeah,
I didn't want to just be okay. You're at the chalet, so I wanted to maintain as much as possible, which is why I didn't make a lot of changes. I kept the item. I kept the Orcus. I really added stuff instead of I changed only stuff that, if left in, didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Well, either way, you did a great job DMing. I know we all had a ton of fun. Do you guys want to do last parting shots before we wrap up this review?
Yeah. So I think it'd be nice if everybody kind of distilled what their main not even criticism, but because I think we spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
But like what their main like advice would be if you run into something similar to this that's just kind of doesn't feel fleshed out.
Okay. Key takeaway.
My key takeaway is like make sure that your players have a goal. And it's concrete, and make sure that there is a central force to drive conflict.
Well said. Billy?
I think my key takeaway is don't be afraid to change. The pre-written stuff, none of it's written in stone. Even stuff that you don't like or that you think won't work, change it. You are still the DM. You are still, you are the god. You can do whatever you want. Don't feel bad to change things or add things or make things, even one that works on its own,
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean like, well, this, somebody wrote this, I don't want to change it. No, screw that. You're in charge. That's a cool, just take whatever ideas you want and change whatever else you don't like.
Bruce Lee, study everything and keep what works.
It's always a good approach.
I think my main thing would be, having not run very many games, just like figuring out which of the options to commit to when you're presented with, because mine's kind of like that a little bit too. Some of these things are convoluted,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's probably better to streamline than try to include it all.
Yeah, I did definitely agree. Simplicity is
Mm-hmm.
more often than not the best approach.
What is it?
I think like my key takeaway I piggybacks on what you guys said. When you're figuring out what storyline you want to tell, I think that'll help determine what type of conflict you want to insert to the story, and just making sure that whatever conflict you choose to bring in, the characters actually, the players of the story actually care about it. That I think that was one of the things that we struggled with, was not really being invested into some of those outcomes. Cool. Well, that concludes our review, and I'll also say criticism of Book of the Raven. We hope you got something out of it. We hope it helps you elevate your game and integrate it into your campaign a little bit better. Do you guys have anything you want to add?
Sorry, Chris Person, don't permanent ban me from the DM Guild or anything.
Well,
Yeah.
we can critique Chris's work. I'm not saying anything about him as a person, but saying Chris Perkins is bad, or a bad writer, or a bad person, because...
So like the weird thing is I do not, like, I've seen a ton of celebrities like living in California and in New Orleans when like we lived there, and I don't get starstruck of anything. Like, like Billy and I were walking around and saw Michael Caine on the street. We're like, tight, Michael Caine.
You've had a bunch
Chris-
of fun...
We've had some encounters, like, but like Chris Perkins is like one of the only ones that I think I'd be like, oh my god. And I don't know if it's because it feels like more personal, because like he's not super famous, so it's like we have some kind of, I want to say, like ownership over, like the same way that like if we saw like a band that like we only know about, like you feel like a little bit of ownership on it.
Mhm.
He is one of the people that I think if I saw on the street, I would like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I'm
Too
a
bad he's not
little,
going to talk to you now.
I know, right? I'm a little glad that I didn't know that he wrote this before we started, because I would have come at it at a complete different angle.
Good thing it's not like a video podcast, so he won't have a little mugshot of you.
Yeah.
Too bad.
These are the reasons why it's perfect, and you just don't understand it.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd be willing to
Honestly,
go
I
with
would kind of love to hear that, like, because I don't know the intricacies. Like, school me on all of the opportunities. Even if they were missed opportunities, school me, because like that's going to help my role playing. That's going to help my world building. It's going to help everything. Like, let me know.
And I think that's valuable, but also in the same breath, if you have to explain why your joke's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in a joke book for new comedians.
Yeah.
That's totally fair. Right. Yeah. I think there's something to learn here, but maybe this wasn't a textbook.
Yeah.
I would just say I'd love for, if he does the interview, or just tell me the things that I overlooked, or the things that you saw were ties that maybe like it's one of those things that like if you're listening to this and you're just shouting at this, like, you missed this, like, you big dummy. Like, I am, I could have overlooked something that was obvious to a lot of people.
Leave a comment and tell Bill how bad he did.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why
in the name of Christopher Perkins.
In the name of defend his honor. But I reference online, like, not just like Wizards like branded merchandise, but like I go on to like to forums, and like that's where I know that way more than like the people who are in hired by Wizards and stuff like that. Like, there are people that I'm on Facebook groups of DMs and things like that give share ideas and stuff. And I was thinking that's the first thing I thought is when I put this on, I was like, what am I missing? Like, I immediately assumed that there wasn't a problem with the thing, there was a problem with me, and I'm missing something obvious. And just based on consensus, it's if it was missed, a lot of people missed it.
Yeah. So, I bet we get a lot of viewership from Rage viewers if we just trash Chris Perkins all the time.
They could just make a career out of it.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Wait. Let me get into my my Rage stance where I'm leaning back, have the multiple chins.
That's awesome.
There we go. And then I just be like, "Well, you see, Chris Perkins never played one time with the real." I don't know. Yes, we would definitely get some Rage viewers.
No, we won't do that because we love Chris Perkins. We love his adventures. Not particularly this one, but others.
Yeah.
But we do hope this review has helped. And we will jump into our next episode, which is going to be our 0 session for Adventure 4 in Candlekeep Mysteries, written by Sarah Madsen.
Oh, I'm not going to look her up to see if she's also a key member
but super
of the
cool.
Wizards community.
I'm stoked to see a female author for an adventure. Like, that's plus. So
I think they did... I think on purpose, they did a good job of like trying to diversify because... this is very much like a white male-dominated, like, role-playing games, fantasy, all that stuff is like...
I mean, just look at the fucking cast of this show.
Yeah, sorry, y'all.
Sorry. There's nothing we can do about that. We try to be inclusive as we can.
I only have so many friends.
Yeah.
So I think they did a good job because it's not that those people aren't out there. It's mostly I think that they're not showcased. So I think they did a great job kind of trying to find talented people that don't look like the four of us.
Yeah, and I'm really happy because Mark, you're running this adventure, and it'll be your first. I do not envy you that it's your first running a campaign and it's also being recorded. That's a little bit of pressure. But join us for that 0 session. We'll talk about what we're playing. Mark will kind of set the parameters, and then the week after that, we'll get into our first session. So thanks so much for listening, y'all, and we'll catch you next time.